King, of course, who is at our Flatiron studio. Hello, Hope King.
Hello, Baker. Hello, Brad. BBs.
Hello, and James Damore, former senior software engineer at Google. He's the author of the controversial essay that criticized women's ability to work in tech. Why, James, does someone feel the need to talk about personal political issues in the workplace?
Yeah, because I think that, so these were issues that were really affecting the terms and conditions of our working environment. And I was trying to point out potentially illegal behavior that was happening at Google, where we were treating people differently based on their race or gender. And that's just, that can create a lot of tensions between people and be actually just counterproductive to what the diversity programs were trying to do.
Hope King, do you have some stuff you want to ask?
Yeah, absolutely, James. Thanks for taking the time. I understand you've been sort of making the rounds here with all the different media outlets. In your opinion, as they've come to you and asked you the questions about the memo, about what has fallen out from it, do you think that the media has been treating you fairly in the way that you've presented yourself and in the aftermath of the events?
I think some media outlets have definitely been treating me fairly, but some have been just having headlines that totally misrepresent what my memo was about. I was actually trying to improve our diversity, and I was simply criticizing the way that we were doing it. And I was trying to use actual scientific evidence to improve the workplace to actually increase the gender representation.
Right. Many of the criticisms not only kind of came after you for the scientific things that you had cited in your piece, kind of debunking those, but also about your character specifically. But there might have been a piece that you might have agreed with, that you might agree with. What would you say is the best criticism of what you've done with the Google essay that you wrote?
I think maybe the best criticism has just been maybe my word choice and my tone, which, of course, this was supposed to be an internal Google document where it was supposed to be analyzed by other engineers that are also very technical, and it definitely wasn't meant to be in the public. So the official terms like neuroticism, that obviously has a lot of negative connotations, and just my very dry tone, and I address many different points, so it's very terse in many areas, so I'm not able to really do many of the areas justice.
All right, well, of course, we reached out to Google earlier before we conducted this interview with you, James, and I just really want to quickly read their statement that they gave us. They said, an important part of our culture is lively debate, but like any workplace, that doesn't mean anything goes. So, James, what's your reaction to Google's statement that they just gave us about that? That they like debate, they want people to be free to talk about whatever their issues are bothering them, but there is a limit to what you can say.
I think that this is just saying that there's certain knowledge that's forbidden, and that's really going to hold Google back, where it's not clear what exactly people can say in the workplace and what science we can do to try to improve the workplace.
So, go ahead, Hope.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, on this idea of debate, do you feel that the value of debate outweighs the harm that it can cause? In this case, it seems many people are upset by what you've written, both internally and externally outside of Google.
I think that's largely a distraction from the actual hurt that I was pointing out in the document, where there are many people that don't agree with this dogma that Google has been pushing, and they don't feel like their viewpoint is valued at all, and they're actually alienated. There are actual blacklists where managers will say, I won't work with this person, I won't hire them, and I'll share this blacklist with other companies so they also won't hire them. So there is a huge amount of hostility already in the workplace, and I'm trying to address that.
So, but James, do we think that the best forum to address that would be through a memo, or similarly, as some organizations will set up, they'll have these open discussions, town halls? It just seems like a very passive way to address an issue that, granted, can be discussed, but perhaps in a better form. You know, thinking back, is there another way that this could have been raised from your position? And I'm also interested in knowing, perhaps, were there any other women that were on the team that also reviewed this memo that you mentioned ahead of time of the software engineers?
Yeah, so also this was just a Google Doc. So I opened it up for people to comment. And I actually sent this out about a month ago to our diversity programs, to HR, to individual Googlers, and many of those were women. I got some reasoned discussion, but largely it was ignored by the diversity programs.
Okay, James, you, of course, talk about the gender gap. You talk about this in your memo. I don't want to harp too much about the memo in particular, but I want to get your opinion on this, that we have this here. There's obviously a systemic issue with gender inequality in Silicon Valley. So what does Silicon Valley, in your mind, have to do to fix that problem?
So yeah, I actually give many suggestions in the document about how we can improve the workplace to get more women interested in tech. So make it more people-oriented, maybe introduce pair programming and more collaboration, and also just having part-time work really be a part of our culture. It's allowed right now, but no one really wants to do it.
Now, James, you call yourself a centrist in many of the interviews that you've conducted, yet your first public interview was with an alt-right YouTuber, someone who associates with the alt-right. Breitbart and other conservative outlets have also taken up your firing as sort of a battle cry for the oppression of free speech. So can you please reconcile that for us, your idea that you are a centrist versus how these other media outlets are trying to actually paint you into a martyr for them?
Yeah, so the media has been misrepresenting both Jordan Peterson and Stefan as alt-right, when really they are both largely libertarian, like I am. And so it's just the media that's been saying that I'm the alt-right and that these people are alt-right and that we're all white nationalists, but that's really not the case.
And these same groups are planning protests, they're planning march specifically out of the comings of what Google has done in your case in releasing you from the company. So, you know, with that in mind, do you then go join them in this kind of quest for making sure that this wrong for you is righted somewhere else, that nobody else loses their job because of this? And how do you then distance yourself, if not marching with them, from this movement?
So I definitely intend to try to improve Google. I don't know if these marches are the best way of doing it. I still don't really have much background on what these marches are trying to do. But
okay.
I do intend to continue to try to improve workplace conditions at Google and in other Silicon Valley
But James, just
companies.
to press you on that, are you planning to march on the Google March that's happening this weekend?
No.
Okay. James, my follow-up I want to ask you about is legal remedies. I've seen a bunch of different interviews that you've given where you have said that you are looking at your legal rights in regards to going after Google. What sort of legal remedies are you looking for? Is it monetary? What are you looking for? And on that note, do you feel that the Google CEO needs to be fired as a result of what just happened?
Yeah, I'm still not totally sure what type of legal remedies are possible, but I don't really think that Sundar necessarily deserves to be fired. I think that he mishandled this situation, but Google is under pressure on multiple fronts, so it's hard to say exactly what he should have done.
And James,
I mean, he's a very competent CEO, obviously.
James, you've said that a lot of people feel the same way you do in Silicon Valley, but they're closeted more or less in their views. Do you think that there are enough of these views where if people feel as you do and they decide to leave, that Silicon Valley might be stifled in their innovation by not being able to attract the right kinds of talent?
Yeah, I think definitely if people leave, that would be a huge harm to Google. And even now, it's a huge harm because people feel like they can't express themselves, which is a huge detractor to worker productivity.
And just on a follow-up here, you know, you say you want to improve Google. I mean, how will you do that given that you're no longer with the company? How will you improve Silicon Valley when many want to disassociate themselves with you completely?
By working with other people largely, and maybe, just simply making it clear that I'm not some sexist bigot that's trying to harm women, but I'm actually trying to improve Silicon Valley. And hopefully when that's clear, Google and many other Silicon Valley companies will not forbid certain areas of knowledge, for example.
And James, just to get a little bit more clarity on your position with the executives, the management team at Google, what is your position on the CEO as well when we think about some of the executives and the leadership really that is overseeing a lot of the change that you would like to see, but a broader discussion still needs to take place, and it starts at the CEO level too, having that leadership?
Yeah, so it's hard to say anything about an individual. I think the larger problem is the entire system, where if any individual in upper management tries to defend me, then they'll be attacked by the same angry mob that got me fired. So it's really something that we have to change with the culture and not with an individual CEO necessarily.
Okay, James, where do you go from here? Have you had any contact with other companies in Silicon Valley about working for them? Do you feel like this entire situation has blacklisted you from the entire region? Do you want to still work in tech? Have you talked about potential opportunities with other companies?
So I'm definitely blacklisted from some companies. I've gotten support from others, but I'm still trying to work things out. I don't necessarily want to just go back to work next week, but I do intend to keep working sort of in the same area, or at least
James,
apply my knowledge.
James, can you say what companies you have been blacklisted by?
Well, these manager blacklists have been shared between many of the large companies, which have culture very similar to Google.
So are those the Apples and the Amazons? Are those the ones that you say probably have blacklisted you?
Yeah.
I just want to understand from your perspective, you know, you're coming out here publicly to answer our questions, and we appreciate that very much. But are you not worried about what all of this might be doing for you in your future career, hindering it in any way? When you mentioned earlier that you do want to work with others, you didn't specifically say who you were working with. So who are the supporters that you have right now that are helping you through this time?
Yeah, I'd not like to disclose who I'm working with just because they'll be under the same scrutiny. But I mean, I'm hoping that by me at least showing myself in public, that people will see that I'm not some crazy Nazi that's against women, which is what the media has been portraying me as.
And James, do you think there should be more women CEOs in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. I don't know enough to really say who should be CEO.
Could you elaborate on that? What do you mean by possibly? Could you elaborate just a moment on that?
I honestly just don't know enough about the area to say who should be CEO.
So it's also found, though, that when companies do commit themselves to the diversity at that level, it brings a certain clarity in thought. It brings a lot of different perspectives. So when we think about the possibility of these positions opening up and women having a seat at the table where it's been well documented that there hasn't been that opportunity, how do we begin to make, and you know, because you've been inside Google and you've documented as well some of your findings, do you think that it could be just as difficult for them, and put yourself in their shoes for a moment, because now they're walking into a scenario where they're surrounded by men in a room, and they've got every single ounce of strategic mindset. They've got everything they need, and it's boosted them to this stature. They've worked for it. So what is the issue with cracking into some of those rooms?
Yeah, so if there are any forms of bias or sexual harassment, we should definitely crack down on that. But we all know that we shouldn't discriminate against women, but it's openly acknowledged and encouraged to discriminate against people with differing political views. And this is well known in Silicon Valley. So I think that's also a huge part of our diversity problem that we need to address.
And in your own personal life, the women that are in your life, how have they responded to what's been happening to you, to your memo specifically?
They generally support me, and they have seen how misrepresented it has been in the media.
And at what point in your career at Google in tech did you say you really wanted to write something like this, knowing that, well, you said it too, that this is a climate, that this is an environment where maybe some of those views that you share are not welcome. So what did it take for you to say, this is something I absolutely have to write?
So I attended a diversity summit about a month and a half ago, and I saw many programs and policies that I thought were against our code of conduct and were really misguided. And so that was what spurred me to write my thoughts down and share that actually as the feedback to the program. But when they ignored me, I shared it with some more people and to more programs.
All right, well, James Damore, we really want to appreciate you coming on for this firing squad that we've essentially been putting you through. Thank you so much for joining us, formerly Senior Software Engineer over at Google. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, James.
All right, yeah, thanks.
Coming up.